American Football Stories is brought to you by Coach Paint. Coach Paint is a great tool that allows us to add graphics to player highlight clips similar to the graphics you see on TV. Coach Paint offers the ability to clearly tell a straight video while increasing retention of information in a shorter amount of time. Up your game with Coach Paint today.
What time is it? Game time! It's gonna be special. They gonna talk about this forever.
Welcome to American Football Stories.
Puts his head down, crashes and spins, and dives. Touchdown!
Bringing together the many perspectives that make up college football in the NFL.
Football is one of the greatest sports ever invented.
From players and coaches.
Believe, baby, believe, baby.
Hey, we playing to win right here, fellas.
To the front office and scouts.
The public is finally beginning to catch up, but they don't even know half the truth.
Us against the world, let's get it.
Your hosts, Robert Parker and Nick Knudsen, bring you American Football Stories.
Welcome to the American Football Stories podcast brought to you by Coach Paint. My name is Nick Knudsen. My co-host is Robert Parker. Today is January 27th, 2021, and we'll talk about the hire at Tennessee, Florida losing its offensive coordinator to the NFL, and the SEC releasing its schedule, along with Robert giving us a few stories from the early days at the Senior Bowl. Thanks for joining us today. Tennessee hires Josh Heupel out of UCF shortly after hiring the athletic director out of UCF, Danny White. Vols fans are whining about this, and it's astonishing to me. I watched a Clay Travis rant where he flat out called Heupel a loser. Hey, look, I can understand if Heupel's not your number one choice or you're all that fired up about it in terms of just thinking it's the absolute guy that's going to turn around your program. But I don't think Tennessee has a Josh Heupel problem. I think Tennessee's problems are a lot deeper than Josh Heupel, and I think they're lucky to have the guy. If you told me a week ago when Jeremy Pruitt's getting pushed out along with Phil Fulmer and we're making jokes about McDonald's bags and everything, that they would end up with the UCF AD and head coach, I would say, wow, that's a major steal for Tennessee. How did that happen? But instead, we're acting like all disappointed that Danny White couldn't land James Franklin or something. What? Why on earth would James Franklin take the Tennessee job right now? Like what? You want to leave Penn State because you can't beat Ohio State so you can go to Tennessee and not beat Alabama? You got to play Alabama every year, man. Tennessee has lost 14 straight to the Tide. You got to play Florida every year. They've lost 14 of 15 to the Gators. You play Georgia every other year, and they've lost the last 4 to Georgia, and I believe they've lost 9 of the last 11 to Georgia. They've lost 18 straight to those 3 rivals. They've lost 38 of 41 to those 3 rivals, and they're 4-5 in their last nine against Vanderbilt, Rob. So what am I missing that Tennessee is selling that they should be getting the great head coach? First off, I think they did get a great head coach. Heupel, I think, is as good as you're going to do. And you can at least put up points on the board with this guy, whereas the last guy didn't like offense. He was basically Will Muschamp. Josh Heupel's going to come in. Tennessee can actually be fun to watch within a couple of years once they get some talent back on this roster, because that's another thing, all your talent left. So I don't know why they think they're going to get some great coach to come in here, but I think they did pretty good considering the circumstances.
Yeah, I tell you what, Nick, this topic really seems like it riles you up. So I'm gonna let you go ahead and keep venting for a little bit. But before you do, I'm right there with you. This Tennessee fan base is a little delusional. I mean, you really haven't been, competing since, the Peyton Manning's and T. Martin days. And that's been a long, long time ago. And I tell you what, we always have this conversation, Nick, where, we talk about coaches leaving programs, going into another program, and the grass is not always greener on the other end. I tell you what, I take my hat off to Josh Heupel for even taking this job. I
right.
know.
Wouldn't you be more critical of Josh Heupel for taking the job than the other way around?
Yes, I know that's my take on it. I tell you what, I'm more critical. I'm actually infuriated with Josh Heupel for taking this job because it really seems like he's going to bail out Tennessee in the next couple of years. But I tell you what, there is sanctions coming down, it's investigations coming down. Everyone is making jokes about the McDonald's bag. We've been on Twitter and social media, and they say, Josh Heupel's compensation at Tennessee consists primarily of GameStop stock and McDonald's monopoly pieces. So this is the talk of the town surrounding this Josh Heupel hire. But I tell you what, I'm right there with you. I think Josh Heupel is definitely an offensive-minded coach. He's definitely going to get Tennessee back to, scoring the ball. But it's going to take some time, especially, when you're under investigations, where you're under sanctions, and this program just kind of been ran in the ground, at least for the last decade. I mean, this is not the Tennessee that we grew up knowing. Me and you, Nick, we've known the Tennessee to kind of, compete and maybe not win all the time, but definitely be competitive, definitely putting a good product out in the field. And we haven't seen that in a long, long time. And I really think Josh Heupel can get Tennessee back to that, but it's just going to take a while. So I'm more critical of Josh Heupel taking this job than, the fan base saying, who the hell is Josh Heupel and why did we hire this guy? I tell you what, you better be lucky that you hired him, because I tell you what, I don't think any other coach will come to this cesspool of a school in Tennessee.
And I'm gonna backtrack a little on your cesspool of a school. I think it's a total shame how bad this job has gotten over the years. I think it's certainly, what ingredient to being a top 15 program year in and year out competing for the SEC East does Tennessee lack, Rob? What ingredient do they lack? Money, passion, anything? Do they lack anything?
No, they don't, and I don't. Maybe let me refrain from saying a cesspool of a school.
That was your Gator coming out.
Yeah. That was my Gator bias is coming out. But at the end of the day, I tell you what. Even with the turmoil that this Tennessee program is in right now, of course we're jokingly talking about the monopoly pieces and in the GameStop stock and everything like that. But I tell you what, Tennessee is still a good job. I mean, it is definitely a recruiting hotbed for that particular state. I mean, you can go out and recruit nationally at Tennessee. You can go to California. You can go to Florida. You can go to New Jersey. You can go anywhere you want, because even though Tennessee hasn't been, the Tennessee that we grew up on, it's still Tennessee. It's still a big time program. It's still, putting 90,000 in the fans. It's still going to be rocking. That fan base is going to be, a ravished fan base. You're going to be on primetime television. You're in the SEC, which is, the best conference in, college football. So you're going to be playing the Alabamas, the Florida, the Georgias of the world. So you're going to be competing against the best of the best. So this Tennessee job is still a good job, even though it hasn't been turning out a good product on the field. So I just tip my hats off to Josh Heupel for even taking this job, because honestly, the grass is not always greener on the other side. And if I was in Josh Heupel's shoes, I would say, hey, I'm going to stay at UCF and I'm going to ride this thing out to see if I can get a better job. But at the end of the day, it's still a good job in my opinion.
Well, the draw for Heupel is you get to work, aside from the fact that it's the SEC, it's Tennessee, you get to work with your boss that you've had. Clearly they have a good working relationship. Yeah. Otherwise you don't hire the guy.
Yeah.
We see Dan Mullen get hired by Scott Strickland at Florida. How's that going? I mean, don't ask Gator fans right now. They'll freak out right now, but in general, that's going pretty well in Gainesville, where they already surpassed Georgia this year, beating Georgia. Not surpassed them in terms of talent, but on the field, the results were good this year against Georgia. And a couple years ago, that seemed like a mighty tall test, and it didn't look like Georgia was going to run away, be the next Alabama. So Tennessee, if you get the right guy in there, you settle down a little bit. I mean, the expectation, they ran off Greg Schiano a few years ago by trying to tie him too deeply into the Penn State thing. And look, he's doing just fine at Rutgers, isn't he? He coached just fine at Ohio State. Like, I'm not even saying Schiano would have been the guy a couple years ago, but Schiano's a hell of a coach, and they ran him off. Like, they just keep running people off. That's all Tennessee is good at right now, is just running people off. So if you or want to treat Heupel as a joke, and you're Clay Travis calling the man a loser, even though, can we talk about how good he did replacing Scott Frost at UCF? Is that you walk into a situation after the school goes undefeated and declares themselves a national champion, and you got to be the new coach. And what do? You have an undefeated season and you win the conference. And then you go toe-to-toe with Joe Burrow and LSU. And we know how good that LSU team was about to become. They went toe-to-toe with those guys in the Fiesta Bowl with their backup quarterback, by the way, right? Mackenzie Milton down, injured, out for the Fiesta Bowl. Backup quarterback. Jackson didn't throw the ball super well down the field. So a lot of running. He figured out a way to make it work. He recruited. I just learned this today. I didn't know this. Do you know Heupel was the guy that offered Jordan Love at Utah State when he was there?
Yeah. Yep.
Only guy to make him an offer. He had success at Oklahoma. He got ran off at Oklahoma. He was damn good at Oklahoma. They had an opportunity to get Lincoln Riley. They moved on. Okay. They had an opportunity to do something else. They moved on. All right. So he does good at Utah State. He does great at Missouri with Drew Lock. He comes in, he kills it at UCF. I know the guy is not Mr. Personality up there on the lectern today, but I mean, what do you want, Tennessee? You think you're like Tennessee, you think you're a 9, but you're really about a 4. Okay? Like you're not that attractive right now. You need to start understanding you could be a 9. You got to work out. You got to get back in shape. You got to do some things. You got to take care of yourself again, Tennessee. And you've been treating yourself like garbage. You've been having too much McDonald's. It's time to cut back on the McDonald's. And you got 2 guys in there now with Heupel and White who have shown they can work together well. Shut up and give them a chance. That's totally. And by the way, I'm not convinced that Heupel is going to be a raging success at Tennessee, because I don't think Tennessee is a place right now with the way Alabama's going, with the way Georgia's going. Oh, by the way, what other programs down the road that's not in your conference? Are you pretty close to Clemson, Rob?
No, they're way off.
No, I'm saying geographically. If a kid lives down the street, he wants to go. If you have a kid, it's not like you have some geographically favorable region that you live in, right? You gotta fend off like Ohio State, West Virginia, Virginia Tech from the north and the northeast, and from the southwest you got to fend off Bama. From the south you got to fend off Georgia, and from the southeast you got to fend off Clemson. So even a person that lives within that, like, little, if you circle the map in America there, that little Appalachian, within 400 miles of this region, they're not necessarily, Tennessee might be their 5th school on the list.
And I tell you what, I'm gonna throw another school in there that they're gonna have to fend off, and that's North Carolina under Mac Brown.
I didn't even name North Carolina.
Yeah.
I mean, so the fact that you ended up a week ago, you were firing Jeremy Pruitt and Phil Fulmer, and you got the balls to complain, Clay Travis. You got the balls to complain about Danny White and Josh Heupel. You're crazy. You did Tennessee did as well as they could do. I'm not saying Heupel is going to be a raging success. I don't even know if he's going to do great at Tennessee, but because of where they're at right now, and they don't give people time. If they give Heupel 7 years, he could develop them into a winner where they're competing and they're respectable again. But I don't think they'll give him that time. I think Tennessee will screw something up. But hopefully being led by Danny White, as long as the boosters aren't jumping in, pulling strings. If Danny White gets to do his job and they just let the guys work, I think Tennessee's got a shot. I think they came out of this very well compared to where they could be. And I'm sorry, I just been fired up listening to all the Vols fans complaining over the last, 12 hours today. It's gotten on my nerves.
Yeah. I think you're right, Nick. You gotta have to give Josh Heupel some time, especially knowing the circumstances that he's coming into with the sanctions and all the talk about the McDonald's bags. That is definitely the talk of the town. But just like you said, they have to compete from the north and the south and the east and the west to get these recruits. But once again, Tennessee, big time program. They have a ravenous fan base. They have good facilities. They're big time. They're playing in the SEC. So I tell you what, Clemson and Alabama, even though they get 5-star recruits and, they're in the top 5 recruiting classes year in and year out, they can't get all of the players. And I tell you what, it was a lot of good players on that Tennessee team.
Yeah.
And actually a lot of those players is entering the transfer portal and they're leaving. So I tell you what, it's not like they're lacking for talent. I think it really came down to coaching, and Josh Heupel, in my opinion, he's a good coach, and he can
What's Josh Heupel's specialty, Rob? What's he known for?
Offense.
What position?
Quarterback.
And what's Tennessee not had?
A quarterback, and that's the
perfect.
thing. And I tell you what, Nick. We always talk about this. Just the quarterback position. Of course, the quarterback position being one of the most important positions on the field. And if you don't have a quarterback, you're not going to win. And if you just look at that Tennessee's quarterback room over the years, it's abysmal. And you're talking about someone who can actually attest to, having a bad quarterback room since Tim Tebow leaving, by me being a Florida Gator fan. And you can attest to that as well too, Nick. So bringing in the right quarterback and having a coach that can coach up that position, it can change a lot. And I can tell you what, maybe it can change a lot in a year or two. So give Josh Heupel some time. Let him get his coaching staff in there. Let him change the culture around. Let him get a good quarterback in there. And let's see if he can fix this thing in Tennessee. But right now it's a dumpster fire, and he's going to have to come in and work really, really hard to turn it around. So
doesn't the transfer portal work both ways, Rob?
It really does.
So you got a lot of positions open right now. And we've just seen the exodus, and you're not going to replace the level of talent. Eric Gray, the linebacker that walked out, I don't know how to say his name, Tuo. There's some of the talent that walked out the door is insane. You're not going to necessarily replace that. And I don't even care about asking those guys to come back because a lot of them made their commitments already. But man, what is out there? There's still some guys out there in the transfer portal this year too, where guys got all this extra eligibility. You don't think there's going to be a quarterback sitting out there available for them to grab at some point? Because I know they got Bailey coming up, but I don't think that's a good fit for Heupel's offense. I think he needs a guy with a little more mobility.
Once again, reports coming out, you have Tate Martell who's entering the transfer portal. So, maybe, Tate Martell takes a shot at Tennessee. I mean, he took a shot, at a couple other schools and it didn't work out. So, maybe he'll find a home in Tennessee. You never know. But just like you said, the transfer portal works both ways. You can lose a lot of talent, but you can bring in a lot of talent. And a lot of talent that you bring in, 9 times out of 10 is probably talent that has experience. And that's one thing that this Tennessee team needs. It needs experience on both sides of the ball. It definitely needs experience at the quarterback position and a quarterback that can actually, go out and win games. I think Joshua Dobbs has probably, been one of Tennessee's better quarterbacks in the last, 5 to 7 years. But at the end of the day, he was a drop back passer. He was more so of a, read option guy, tuck in a run. So, but when you have those games against the Alabamas or the Floridas and the Georgias where, you can't beat them, those particular teams with your feet, you're going to have to beat them with your arm. That's what Tennessee has been struggling with for the last, 5 to 7 years. And hopefully Josh Heupel can fix that problem. So, I took my hats off for Josh Heupel even taking this job.
They'll be a lot more fun to watch in 2021 than they were in 2020. I can promise you that without knowing anything about the roster or anything else. I think even if they're losing, this team's going to be the style of play that they played at UCF. Those teams were awesome to watch. And I think Tennessee fans, you should try to tone down the whining and start being a little more grateful that I think you hit a home run. If Danny White's a home run on the AD hire, I think Heupel's at least a triple. So get on board, Tennessee. Stop your whining. You did pretty good. You came out pretty clean considering. And because they're turning themselves out in with the NCAA, who knows? Maybe the NCAA will take some mercy. So we'll see how that situation evolves in Tennessee. Maybe it won't be as bad as we're thinking. But I like the hire. I love the hire in the AD, and I do like the hire in the head coach. I understand why people might be caught off guard with it, but man, he's done some good things. Look at the guy's resume. You got to give him a break. Give him a shot at least. I think he's deserved it. So, all right, let's stay in the SEC East. The Gators. Florida loses Brian Johnson after a lot of talk of turnover, especially on the defensive side of the ball. Florida loses offensive coordinator Brian Johnson, gets hired to go co-offensive coordinator / quarterbacks coach, official title. I believe he accepted the position with the Philadelphia Eagles, to become the quarterbacks coach up there. He's replaced with Garrick McGee, who was on staff already as an analyst. And Rob, Brian Johnson was an up-and-comer. Good for him for getting the job in Philly. I know it's a guy that interviewed for a few head coaching jobs in college. The NFL experience won't hurt his resume at all in terms of being a college head coach. But tell me a little bit about Garrick McGee. And this is really Dan Mullen's offense anyway, right?
Yeah, you're right for the most part. Once again, Garrett McGee, in his past, he was the offensive coordinator for Arkansas, so he does have that offensive coordinator experience, along with being the offensive coordinator at Illinois as well, Northwestern and Louisville, where he ultimately coached, the future Heisman Trophy winner Lamar Jackson. So I think, having that, that on his resume, and also, coaching on the same staff with Todd Grantham in Louisville when he was the defensive coordinator. I think this is going to work out for Dan Mullen and the Florida Gators moving forward. So I think this was a good, hire from within. And I think, that's one thing Dan Mullen has kind of been emphasizing, where he kind of wants to hire within and kind of pull head coaches, up the ladder. So I think this was a good hire. And, I tip my hats off for Dan Mullen, making this hire from within and not going outside. And just like you said, Brian Johnson going to the Philadelphia Eagles as the quarterback coach, good for him. Hopefully he can kind of get his feet wet in the NFL and hopefully come back to be a head coach in college or wherever, his path takes him. But I think this Florida team is definitely in good position moving forward with Garrett McGee.
Yeah, nothing to worry about, I feel like. But Brian Johnson, definitely a guy that people liked on the staff, and certainly a guy that kind of think he's going to get a college job in the next few years, even though he's just made the NFL jump. All right, SEC schedule released today. Bama goes to Florida to open SEC slate for both teams on September 18th. That's concerning if you're the Gators.
Yeah, I tell you what, but it's not too concerning in my opinion, because I tell you what, I think this. I know with Alabama, they have this notion where, they don't rebuild, they just reload. But I tell you what, it's going to be hard to, reload when you're losing the talents of Devontae Smith, Najee Harris, Jalen Waddle, Mac Jones. So I really think it's going to be, not a steep climb for Alabama this upcoming season, but I think it's going to be a little bit steeper than what we normally see for Alabama.
I'm going to choose the side of not doubting Bama and think they're going to be a total machine still. Good for Florida to play them early, though. Get that one out of the way right up front and move on with your life. Ole Miss goes to Bama and Auburn at LSU on October 2nd. Ole Miss, Lane Kiffin and Nick Saban are always going to be must-see TV. But how are we feeling about the Harsin hire at Auburn and LSU bouncing back with the new coordinator hires this year?
Yeah, I'm really excited to see how LSU bounced back. I know this season was kind of riddled with the pandemic and COVID and everything like that. LSU had a lot of opt-outs, but this LSU team is still talented. And Ed Orgeron is definitely, one of the top tier coaches, not only in the SEC, but in the nation. So I definitely look forward to LSU bouncing back. And same thing with Auburn. I really think, Auburn is going to hit that curve where, they're going to bounce back and they're going to be more competitive than what they, have been. But I tell you what, we talked about the quarterback position in Tennessee. We're going to talk about the quarterback position in Auburn this year. And that's one position that Auburn has to shape up moving forward.
Yeah, both teams are total wild cards this year to me. I do love that this game always seems to be early in the SEC slate, and the winner of this game usually goes on to be the biggest challenger to Alabama in the West. Might be different this year, though, because Texas A&M is stepping into that role. And October 9th, Bama goes to A&M out in Aggie land. Georgia also plays at Auburn that day. That game's getting moved up from November. We saw that early last year. Looks like they'll keep it early this year. So Georgia and Auburn early, and Bama at Texas A&M on October 9th. And I'm telling you, Rob, I looked at A&M's schedule. They're going to be 5-0, when Bama comes to town. So this game could easily be either one versus two or a top three matchup.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be a game that you circle on the calendar because it's going to be a pivotal game for both teams. So it's definitely going to be one of those games that everyone's going to be tuned into.
Can A&M do it this year? Can they at least play within 4 touchdowns to them?
I think this year, yeah, because Alabama's just losing so much. On both sides of the ball. So I think Texas A&M will be able to keep it close. I know Texas A&M is bringing back, some of their players, and they're not losing too much, but they are losing, their play caller and their leader and Kellen Mond. But at the end of the day, I think, Texas A&M can keep it close and maybe, pull the upset. But it's going to be tough. Just like you said, I think it's a little bit more of a rebuild year than normal for Alabama. But at the end of the day, you never discount Alabama being the machine that it is, especially under Nick Saban. But, they're losing a lot of pieces, as far as coaches, coordinators and stuff on the staff. And they're losing a lot of pieces as far as talent-wise to the NFL draft. So I think we're definitely going to see – if teams want to beat up on Alabama, this is probably going to be the year to do it. So get them while they're not down, but down than what they normally are.
Look at you. But maybe we'll have to put out some preseason rankings and watch you rank Alabama like 12th or something. They're still a team to beat in my book until they get beat. Florida at LSU on October 16th. This game is a little more interesting this year because this could be a total elimination game. Normally, this is a game where a lot of years Florida can reach the LSU game unscathed. You look at that, LSU's usually one loss to no losses too by the time. And usually you can afford to drop it because it's a cross-divisional opponent, but it's usually a real fun matchup. But, man, Florida, I don't see Florida beating Bama early. If they lose to LSU as well, I'm not sure 2 losses can go in the East. So I think that's a critical matchup right there. Really depends on how LSU bounces back too. You see Florida having a shot in Death Valley there with Emory Jones?
I think they do. I think this LSU Florida matchup that we've seen over the last couple of years. I think is definitely one of the most prominent big time games that we get to watch year in and year out. And I think every year it just kind of builds up even better. And of course how Florida lost with Marco Wilson throwing the shoe in that game coming to an end and ultimately maybe causing Cal Trask the Heisman. I think, that's going to leave a bitter taste in, all the returning players for Florida, and they're going to come out and they're going to play fairly well. And once again, LSU, they got the win. Maybe they take their foot off the gas a little bit, and they are losing a lot of players to the NFL as well. So I think this is going to be a good game, which every LSU Florida game is definitely a good game year in and year out.
I said it the other night on Cater's Breakdown, but because maybe this is more my personal feeling, but I feel like it's shared among the fan base. Are you over the Florida? Are Florida fans over that LSU loss yet from this year? That's the one that really haunts my dreams more so than the Alabama. Dan Mullen doesn't count the Cotton Bowl, neither will I. But
yeah, I tell you what, I think that LSU loss.
I think the fog helps the dream element of it too. Just seeing a shoe fly through the fog.
It really doesn't. But I tell you what, that is definitely going to be a loss that's going to haunt the Gator fan base and Gator Nation for years to come.
We need revenge.
And it definitely going to need some intervention. But I tell you what, I think everything will be a little bit better when, hopefully, the COVID and this pandemic kind of die down, when more fans is going to be in the stands and everyone's going to be rocking again. So I think, ultimately, the fans will get over it, especially if Dan Mullen can kind of, pull off a season like he did last year with Cal Trask at the helm. I know Emory Jones is probably going to be the guy, more likely than not, at least starting out the season and see how that goes. But I think the fan base would definitely get over if Florida can beat Alabama early in the year.
Hype train, Vols. Get on the hype train, Vols. At the Tide, October 23rd. Probably going to be ugly, but just wanted to note Tennessee here. Don't really have much else to add about it. I'm sure you don't either, Rob. Georgia, Florida, October 30th. This game has decided the East the last several years. Now, Rob, Georgia plays Auburn on October 9th, so they'll probably only have at most one SEC loss coming in, probably be undefeated. But at most, they'll probably have one loss coming in, whereas Florida might have the two. So Florida might have a shot in this one. But if Georgia's sitting undefeated and Florida loses that LSU game, it might not even matter for the East. But interesting note outside the SEC, do you know who Georgia opens with this season?
I can't recall who
Team, annual playoff team. Nearby, where's Orange?
Oh wow, Clemson
and Georgia, week 1, baby.
Wow,
week 1. So Georgia might get humbled early, and that might affect them. Maybe that's a hangover, and they lose to Auburn. Who knows? LSU at Bama, November 9th. Let's hope that game bounces back for some relevance. I missed Coach O this year. I don't like losing Coach O. Coach O winning is more fun. But except against the Gators. But Alabama at Auburn and this is to end the season. I believe it's November 16th, 23rd, 30th, November 30th. Alabama at Auburn, Texas A&M, LSU. Ole Miss at Mississippi State, Georgia Tech, Clemson, South Carolina, Florida State, getting those classic rivalries back. It's good to see a regular college football schedule and not talk about COVID too much. I think even if if things stay the way they are right now, I think we're going to have a normal college football schedule, Rob.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I can definitely see us having a normal college football schedule moving forward.
Yeah. Maybe not full stadiums.
Not full stadiums, but I don't think we're going to have, everything that kind of, came up this past year with, COVID and everything. I think, if COVID is still around, at least we kind of have, protocols and guidelines to follow where we can get through a season.
And they just released new ones. We're wearing triple masks now, right?
Yeah.
So problem solved, everyone. Full stadium. Can't wait to be back in full stadiums next year with everyone wearing triple mask in 95-degree heat. That's going to be awesome. Rob, you're at the Senior Bowl we mentioned at the beginning of the show. Give us some notes. This was day 1 down in Mobile for you, right?
Day two, actually. Day 1 started out on Tuesday. Actually got to see the Heisman Trophy winner outside of full pads, and I tell you what, it didn't look like he put on any muscle, and he actually refrained from being measured and weighed. So I think the outside noise is that he's going to do it at this pro day, but it's some outside noise that he might not. So I think he's kind of putting his stock in the fact that it doesn't matter how much he weighs or how much he weighs in. He's a ball player. So and I tip my hats off to Devontae Smith for that.
I can just look at him, 168.
Yeah. I tell you what, I don't think he's I'm definitely not going to give him 1 pound over 175, and that's me, and that's me being generous.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, sometimes it's not the size of the dog; it's the size of the fight in the dog. And I tell you what, he has a lot of fight, and I tell you what, if he didn't, he definitely wouldn't won a Heisman Trophy. So the talent is definitely there. But outside of Devontae Smith, it's just so much talent down here. I know Trey Sermon is down here, and he's not able to go because of the injury that he suffered in the national championship. But it's just a lot of talent down here. Especially Kadarius Toney had an awesome day 1. I tell you what, it just seems like he was unguardable in his one-on-one matchups. He's really making a name for himself, just like he did this whole year, and he's making a bigger name for himself out here at the Senior Bowl, going up with the best of the best. So I tell you, there's a lot of talent down here, and I'm so excited for day 3 tomorrow, and then of course the game on Saturday. So I'm just looking forward to everything. I'm soaking it in, getting the experience, and just putting boots to the ground, and just actually seeing these guys live out their dreams of making it to the NFL.
Boots to the ground for Robert Parker and American Football Stories with the presence at the Senior Bowl to get some up-close look at these guys we'll be talking about in the draft. Not going to make too many announcements right now, but we do have some players and a couple other things we're working on coming your way for some draft talk, Rob. Looking forward to this stretch of the season. It's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, it really is, especially when we get down to the nitty gritty, talking about draft talk, scouting. We got a lot coming. Stay tuned. Stay tuned for
Stay
American
tuned.
football stories, and we got some surprises coming your way to the audience out there.
All right, Rob. Well, I want you to enjoy the hell out of Mobile this week for the Senior Bowl. Glad you're down there representing American football stories. And for the audience at home, thanks for tuning in to this episode. I know it was a little long, covered a lot of topics, but it was a lot of fun to discuss, and it's good to be back on the podcast here. We'll send you out with a word from our sponsor, Coach Paint. American Football Stories is brought to you by Coach Paint. Coach Paint is a great tool that allows us to add graphics to player highlight clips similar to the graphics you see on TV. Coach Paint offers the ability to clearly tell a straight video while increasing retention of information in a shorter amount of time. Up your game with Coach Paint today.
Thank you for listening to American Football Stories podcast. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel, American Football Stories. We are working to grow our network on YouTube and would love to have you subscribe. You can find us also on Apple Podcasts, on Twitter, at American FB Story, and on our website, AmericanFootballStories.com. I am Robert Parker. My co-host is Nick Knudsen. This has been another episode of American Football Stories.